Hey everybody, welcome to the Fired Up with CJ show. We are talking to Iman Alzabi and we are talking to her about her book, The Art of Surrender, a practical guide to enlightenment, happiness, and well-being. So welcome, Iman.
Thank you for having me. Thank
So
you.
I find your story fascinating. Tell us a little bit about what prompted you to write this book.
Um, Sorry, that's the call for prayer
I love
this
it.
time.
Yes, I love it.
So the book has come through as I was doing a meditation on finding my purpose. And then the idea came, and I just said, no way, I don't think so. And I just let it go for about 2 years. But in the meantime, I knew that's going to happen somehow.
All right, so it's undeniable to hear the beautiful call for prayer in the back. Tell us a little bit about what that call for prayer is, too. Because for whatever reason, it's meant to be, right? It's meant to be
I
during
think
this phone
so.
call, and I think it's related to what we're going to talk about, and I'm not sure why, but that's at least what my intuition is telling me. So,
Okay.
so I know that you have a call for prayer how many times during a day? I know it's several times.
5 times.
5 times. And what are the times that you have a call for prayer?
We have it early morning, like maybe 5 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll have another one at 12 p.m., which is the noon prayer.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have one about 4 o'clock, which is the afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have another one, which is at dawn,
Oh, wow.
sunset, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have one which is right now, which is a prayer before going to sleep, which is
Oh.
the last prayer.
Ah, okay. And for the prayers, are you praying for a specific thing at different times? Are you praying for different things, or what are you praying for during these 5 times during a day?
So this has come about during the time that the prophet has ascended and visited God in the sky.
Mm-hmm.
And I know some people will say, what?
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the miracles of the Prophet Muhammad, that he was able to meet the other prophets and be in the sky in the presence of God.
Mm.
During that time, he was given the prayers, the 5 prayers.
Mm.
And those prayers are basically rituals. We recite the Quran, and then we just are always in constant praise of God.
Mm.
And that's what we do. And then at the end of them, we pray for ourselves. So we pray for whatever we want to pray for ourselves. But we have to kind of do the prayers themselves, the way they come through the prophet to us, and
Mm-hmm.
then we recite our own prayers.
Mm. And so, is it what are the things that what are the passages from the Quran? Are they different passages during each of the times?
There's one constant one, which is a beautiful one. It talks about guiding us to the straight path and staying on the straight path. So
Mm.
that's something we always open at each and every prayer.
Mm-hmm.
And then we recite anything that we know of the Quran. So
Mm.
whatever we've memorized. So there's a constant one that we have to say, and then there's a variable one, which is up to us, however we feel called to say. And
Ah.
then we continue with the movements. I don't know if you've seen that
Yeah, the
anywhere
prayer
that you've seen.
movements where
Yes, yeah,
you have I've seen rugs where people lay down something that they can
right.
face the north. Is that right? Face a certain direction.
We face the Kaaba, which is wherever in Mecca,
Okay.
which is what we call the house of God.
Okay. So you face the house of God, and then,
Yeah.
as I recall, you are on your knees and you're praying, and you put your head down to the ground. Is that right? Is that the
Mm-hmm,
movement?
mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. So I've seen
Yeah,
that when
yeah.
we've visited several different mosques before, and so and I remember walking around in Turkey and or Egypt, and people who are so devout, they literally have their skin rubbed off in their in between their eyebrows for almost like
Mm.
showing how often they've prayed, because they've prayed so much. I don't know if that's a thing, but at least when we were talking to our tour guide, we're like, "What is that?" She said, "Well, that's kind of a mark that you've done a lot of prayer." Um,
True, yeah. I mean, we've seen that a lot, but it's basically you're obligated by the 5 prayers. They're a must in your life. So we arrange our life around those prayers.
Mm-hmm.
So we say, for example, friends, I'll meet you after this prayer, or I'll, when we
Oh,
go to work, at work they know it's time for prayer, so they give us the break to
yeah,
pray and come back. So our life is around these prayers,
yeah.
and yeah.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing actually to just it's at this point what I do is I try to I get when my mind is too busy in the work and doing and forgetting who I am at some spiritual level. I try to I've done everything. I have like a chime, I have things in my calendar to kind of remind me to touch back. So it's nice that everyone is kind of touching back at that moment, and it's a time to touch back to your divinity throughout the whole day. It's quite beautiful. The one that's hard for me when I was in traveling in Turkey was the one that I think is in the early morning is like 5. I don't remember. I remember it being really early. Isn't it like at 5 in the morning or some really
Yeah,
early
yeah.
time?
And this is a sign how much you're dedicated and how much you do actually believe in God and love God.
Hmm.
That's how we see it.
Yeah. All right. So there is a point in time in your book that you talk about where you have these healing abilities. Can you tell us a little bit about the abilities that you have and how that came to be and
Yeah.
how that resonated with your faith?
Yeah, I mean those I wouldn't call them abilities.
Oh, I'm not sure how to
They're
describe them. Sorry, I don't mean to offend you.
no, it's all right, but it's they seem to be I don't know, they could be gifts. But I was just I'm somebody who likes to explore and loves to try things. And as I did the energy healing work, I was able to get good results, with asthma, with back pain, with so many things,
Mm.
not with headaches. That I couldn't, I couldn't work with headaches. But emotional issues, trauma was one of my biggest things that I was able to kind of spot, tell you the age, work on clearing that with the clients.
Mm.
There's so many things. It depends on each person.
Mm-hmm.
But studying myself during my anxiety and depression has allowed me to understand the psyche of the human being and understand when triggers happen and
Mm.
why they happen and how we are always like on autopilot running
Mm-hmm.
those patterns over and over and over again,
Mm-hmm.
and they kind of shape our perception of life and perception of the reality that we see around us.
Mm-hmm. So is that stuff that you learned through your coaching, through your spiritual practices, or it sounds like you're saying that you learned it from your own experience?
It was mostly my experience of my own experience as well as experience with my clients.
Mm, mm. Okay, so that and how popular is life coaching? Where and tell us where you're located for folks who are not. You're in Abu Dhabi, right?
Yes, I'm in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates. A lot of people know Dubai, so if I say Dubai, they'll say yes.
Okay. Uh,
So where the highest bridge or building in the world is.
okay, and how familiar are people with life coaching? The concept of life coaching. How open are they to going in and visiting, their traumas and their triggers, and having an energy healer come and work with them?
They're pretty open. It's becoming very popular here, so it's no issue here.
Okay.
People are very well connected. It's a very diverse culture we have here.
Mm-hmm.
We have people from all over the world, so we're kind of a mixed metropolitan kind of city. So people
Right.
know each other. They know what's the latest in the healing and the coaching world. There are all kinds of groups here.
Okay. Well, and even in the small suburb outside of Seattle where we are, and my girlfriend is a healer, and she had some strong reservations of doing because she was raised as a Catholic, and so she said that if in her religion, the way that she was raised, that she would be considered like some type of like demon worshiper by doing like she's done Reiki healing, and my friend also has these psychic abilities, and she had said that you know she really felt when she had these gifts that they were somehow incongruent with being a good Catholic. So, what was your experience when these gifts started emerging for you?
It was very, very controversial. So my sisters didn't like what I was doing
Mm-hmm.
and thought that I was going away from my faith. I was torn apart. I didn't know because my experience taught me otherwise, but then they were telling me something else. However, life is like, complete circles for you. So
Mm-hmm.
there's always has to be a closure. So
Mm-hmm.
I've come to a point where I've realized that when we start to get that healing abilities or gifts, we're reaching outside of us, and then we realize that we're reaching for those what they call the mediums or angels or whatever that
Mm-hmm.
might be, that a lot of people have put their power outside of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But I've come full circle where I've understood that what, God is the source of all of there is,
Mm-hmm.
and through God I can heal. So
Mm-hmm.
God is our healer,
Mm-hmm.
and through the prayers, and there are ways by which the prophet has taught us to heal ourselves, where we put our hand and say a special prayer for that. That's how I'm doing my healing work. It feels um, more resonant right now
Mm-hmm.
than when I was trying to reach outside of myself through whatever means I used to uh,
Mm.
try out. Yeah.
Yeah, I see. Okay, interesting. Because you know what's so funny? Every morning I wake up and I tune to I guess I would call it my internal wisdom. And I ask, what is it that's trying to emerge today? And the thing that I got was that I said, the thing that I was intuitively pulled to was, what habit do I need to start changing? And and I don't know if this is what you're saying, but I'm just sharing just to clarify,
Mm,
is that I woke up and it said, well, your understanding of faith is a little bit off. And the message I got, internal message, was that, God is within all of us. And oftentimes people look outside of themselves, praying to God, hoping that something external to us will help resolve the problem, where God resides within all of us. And so when you're praying outward, it's 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 as if you're not empowered with that same power within you. Is that what you mean, or is it, how did it resonate? So for me, that's how it resonates for me, is that my
yeah.
faith is actually placed externally versus um, internal, knowing that it's inside of me. Um, is that what you meant,
That
or something
that's
different?
that's not what quite I meant.
Okay.
However, I mean, what's inside of us is an intention. So human beings have the intention, thoughts, and intentions, and willpower, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've got free will.
Mm-hmm.
So what I see is that a lot of people kind of say, believe that there are divine inside. Of course, that has its own flaws as a concept.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the spiritual inquiry that I've done is that you understand that you've got your own gifts and talents and abilities. You're well connected to the world around you. You've got consciousness that is expansive, expanded. You've got so many ways by which you can express yourself and be the best that you can be. However, that doesn't mean you're God, number one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Number two, that God hears your inner thoughts, and God is in your heart, can see and feel your heart and feel your pain. So whenever you're praying, God is always with you. But
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't mean you kind of make yourself into that divine being where you kind of like say, I'm it, I have it all.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
That is out of balance because
Yeah.
it makes you feel like, I don't know if you know about free radicals, where they're like kind of lacking synchronicity, lacking connectivity.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just me saying I am it. It means
Oh,
that I've,
yeah.
I've got all that I need in life. I need no support. I need nothing. Does that make sense?
I see. Yeah, no, that's not what I was saying when I said that, but it's also, I think it's probably closer to that. You're
Mm.
connected. It's with
Connection.
it's
That's how I
well, I
see
think
it.
I actually think it's within you, and that you're connected as well. I mean, this is just a different, I don't know if it's a
Mm.
different, if I don't have a felt experience of it yet. That's what I was getting
Mm.
from my
Mm.
message. Like, you need to have a felt experience of God within you. And
And that happens in your heart.
Yeah.
That happens in your heart, especially when you kind of pray hard and ask for what you want. It happens in your heart. And then life responds, God responds to you. You see experiences, people show up, things happen,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
That's how it happens all the time.
Mm.
Just being sincere of wanting that what you want, or wanting the connection with God.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, I can see that. I mean, it's I definitely understand what you're saying. I don't know if I fully, my own personal experience is
Mm,
slightly different, but it's also not, I think the thing that I hear as your cautionary tale is people who walk around thinking that they are God. Or there is,
yes.
that
Yeah.
I'm not that. I'm far from that.
Yeah.
But I
I
think,
see what you're
yeah,
saying.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, I think
Yeah.
I see that I think is actually, uh, problematic on many levels. But it's more, I think, probably what you're saying is how you feel about it is just the connection to God. And so you had these healing gifts. Your sister, um, and it was something that was, a little bit of a conflict. What was the conflict about when your sisters and family members were having problems with, or I don't even know to describe it. How would you describe it? Were they having problems, issues? What were their comments about
Yeah.
your gifts?
Well, I mean, Islam is one of those religions that is well preserved and protected,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we always go by what the Prophet has brought in, and the holy book, the Quran.
Mm-hmm.
So anything that may seem suspicious, may seem outside of that, it always feels like this is a false, elusive way to get out of the religion. So it's
Oh.
that's how they perceive it, and
Mm.
they tell you you've got to stop this. My sister was not happy with that, and she
Mm-hmm.
had a dream about me where I looked really terrible in the dream, and
Oh.
her interpretation of the dream is that I was out of my faith. And
Oh.
that's how she started telling my other sisters and telling me to stop this, and everybody else were like, Iman, you've got to stop this. This is not good.
Mm.
Uh, and then I had to close my practice at some point and not see any more clients. So I wanted to just be in a space where I really wanted to think through this, and
Mm.
really get to the space where I feel I'm in a good place.
Mm. And what's the inquiry that you did during that time?
The inquiry is basically trying to reconcile my experience with my religion. So I went to the Quran and really asked those questions about the origin of the universe. I looked at quantum theory. I found that in the Quran. All ways of which God has talked about the birth of the universe, talked about the role and the purpose of human beings, and then try to reconcile with what I've also learned through the different spiritual practices, right?
Mm-hmm.
The funny thing is that those spiritual experiences, they start to talk to you about self-development, which is the
Mm-hmm.
door from which I have entered.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to develop myself. I had anxiety and depression, and I went in, and then it started to get deeper and deeper. Where you tune in, you look at other people's energy, you read their thoughts, you look
Mm-hmm.
at ways by which you are able to perceive their past, and all of these abilities, right? This is where I started to feel funny, where this is not. I don't think this is right. So,
Right.
and that's what my sisters referred to back then, but I didn't kind of feel it myself
Right.
until a place where I started to feel, I don't think this is right. I think my sister was right about this whole thing, because you're
Right.
kind of anticipating something in the future. You've got something that is hidden, and you're kind of going to the spiritual realm for that information,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe we're not allowed to we don't have permission to bring that forward to the human being until they're ready to move on, until
Mm.
they're ready to change it themselves, because it's going to appear to them in patterns, it's going to appear to them in their experience.
Mm.
So who are we to kind of prematurely do that for them, you know?
Mm. Okay, got it. So what happened as a result of going to that and saying, "Well, God, that doesn't feel quite right." How did that affect your practice with people afterwards? Because perhaps you saw that they had pain. You saw
Yeah.
that may be related to a previous life that they had. I don't know. Do you even believe, does Islam believe in past lives? I'm not sure.
No, no. We
Okay,
believe
so
in two lives, two deaths.
okay.
So the two lives is basically when you're born, and then when when you're coming into birth again, which is at the day of judgment. And we believe in two deaths, which is the death before you have come in, and the death when you die in this life.
Okay. Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
So if there was trauma in that person's life, you can maybe with your abilities, with your gifts, you can actually see what that relates to. Do you share that, or you just don't share it because it's not yours to share, is what I'm hearing you concluding.
What's funny, CJ, is that it started to all. When you go to the spiritual realm, you're always there, you're always connected, and you're always receiving information, right? But when you kind of decide, I want balance, I want what's right, I want what's truthful, you start to feel like, you know what, the two worlds blend together. You're grounded, you're here, you're present. You may get, a few things here and there, but it doesn't mean you're always seeking information. You're not always there. Does that make sense? Or not?
I think what you're saying is that you're in this and do you say that when you're doing are in your day in day out life, or are you always living in a spiritual realm in addition to as you navigate your your regular things like your shopping and things like that? Is that what you mean? And that you may be getting information because you're always in that realm. I've talked to some spiritual people who are always in that realm, so they get they'll be walking down the grocery store, and for example, they may get that woman actually should be eating more magnesium. And
that kind of experience.
And the question is whether is it appropriate to talk to a stranger who you don't even know, who's not even asking you for information, but that has some type of medical issue, or like this person has pancreatic cancer that that has undetected. Do you say something because that person hasn't hired you for anything, but you still sense that they have something, if tended to, could be addressed? And that's when I don't know what people do. Everyone's different, but I'm not sure. I'm hearing you would say, I would not give them that information because that's not really.
No, it's premature, and it's not our place to do that.
Yeah.
The fact that we know that does not give us the right to say it to them.
Right. Is that what you were referring to before when you were saying, or was it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I think that I think that there's it's almost in psychological term they talk about boundaries, and so to me that feels like an unboundaried experience when people go up to someone just because they have the gift of knowing. It doesn't mean that they have the right to share. In my mind,
I agree.
Yeah. Okay, got it. So that actually. So now when you're in your current coaching, and are you still doing a healing practice, or are you just doing coaching? What's your practice look like after what changed after reading the Quran and reconciling your experience with your religion?
Well, I still haven't opened my practice again. I did a few coaching sessions here and there. They're not full-time kind of thing, and then I stopped. So I'm focusing more on writing, more on speaking, more on being on radio and TV if that's possible. So that's where I'm talking more to people. I feel like it's going to be a message that I'm going to be talking about rather than sitting one-on-one and talking about issues.
Right.
But when I'm still looking at my also coaching practice and reframing it and creating a framework that people can actually go through the stages to which the spiritual journey stages to which you go and move into a stage of surrender. Hopefully, that's where I'd like to get them to.
And the question that I had was, surrender means so many different types of things. So, from your understanding, your own personal experience, and then your understanding of the Quran, how do you look at surrender? How would you describe surrender?
Well, a lot of people think of surrender as giving up, and they think of it as my power is taken away from me, when in reality that everything around you is in a state of surrender. Everything. The moon, the stars, and the trees, everything is in a state of surrender. The only thing that is not in surrender is us, right? We've got
Yes.
willpower, right?
Yes. Uh-huh.
We've got a mind that thinks, that
Mm-hmm.
goes and criticize. We've got a mind that judges. We've got a mind that goes into the future and the past, gets scared and get regretful and so on. So basically, surrender is about finding that space where you enter the sacred circle with the divine. And
Mm.
this is a space where you start to give over your worries, to give over that which is outside of your control. So
Mm.
it's a balance between states of being and doing. So, for
Mm-hmm.
example, if I have a goal that I want to achieve, the goal is active within me. I'm always thinking about it. I
Mm-hmm.
have it written down, I have it planned out, I have everything, but that's the best that I can do.
Mm-hmm.
And I can only control my thoughts, actions, and intentions.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot guarantee the outputs, I cannot guarantee results.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a state where by which surrender comes over, where you say, God, I give this to you. I've done the best that I can, and I
Mm.
give this over to you.
Mm.
And it's a way of life. It's a way of
Mm.
life. You get up during the day, and you get up in the morning, and you say to God, God, I give you this day. Please make this a beautiful day for me,
Mm.
or whatever you're asking for that specific day.
Yeah, yeah. It's There's this woman named Tosha Silver here in the that has a very similar kind of model, and I'm just going to share it with you only so I can understand how your model is similar or different. Her model is that everyone has desires, and so to give up desires is really just hard. It's not within our
Mm,
realm of human possibility to give away our desires, which is our, I really want this job. I really want to be in a relationship with that guy. I really want, a fast
mm,
car, whatever. Those kinds of desires are things that are hard to give away, but to surrender your worries about what outcome it will come in. Like, so maybe you really want to be in a relationship, but it may not be for another 5 years, or it may be the relationship that you wanted with a man comes through a child. You know what I mean? Like, you have a new
yeah, yeah,
child, so that you release the how it's supposed to look, but that knowing that God, Allah, I'm not sure who is
same
listening.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
listening, and that they hear your desires, and if it's within your path, um, which it probably is, because if you are connected, that desire is somehow connected to your own inner sense of what is your path that will come, but not to worry about the package it comes and how it comes. You have to release your worries and I guess in Buddhist they would call it your attachments to making all those things look a certain way, come a certain way.
Right.
Do you think the same, or how do you think of the art of surrender?
Yeah, yeah. It's basically leaving it to the wisdom of God, but
Mm-hmm.
it's also about surrender is about being teachable. So
Mm-hmm.
not everything that you're asking for will come the way that you'd like it to be.
Mm-hmm.
So there will be times when other outcomes that will emerge, and then you will understand why. And then you will
Mm.
understand, you'll be given a different perspective, you'll be given a different wisdom that
Mm.
comes with that which you didn't want. And or there will be times when you're grateful because you say, I am glad I didn't ask for that, because if I did, look at my friend, that's what happened to them, for
Right,
example.
right,
You
right,
know, it's
right.
about being teachable, open, and allowing God to be active in your life, to
Mm-hmm.
allow God to shape your life as you move on.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is surrender.
Okay, and is that consistent with what you've read in the Quran?
I, that is the Quran. That's
Oh,
what it teaches.
sorry, I just don't know about the Quran. I apologize. It's not.
No,
It's
no,
out of my ignorance of
don't
the
be.
Quran.
No,
So
don't be.
what does the Quran actually? So the Quran teaches about what specific? Can you actually tell us a little bit
Well,
about the Quran?
sure. I mean, the word Muslim means that who submits their willpower to God,
Mm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And the beauty of that is that you have willpower, but you willingly give that over to God. And you
Mm.
allow God to help you out in your journey in this life.
Mm-hmm.
That is what is Islam. It's about letting God lead your life
Mm.
and being in that space and being in constant state of prayer. Just like everything else in nature, everything is whispering and praising God. That's what God says in the Quran. So the first verse that have come through in the Quran was the word read. So that was the first thing that Prophet Muhammad has received through Gabriel,
Mm-hmm.
and it was the angel Gabriel, and then he said to him, read. And then he said, I can't read. And he tells them, read. And he says, I cannot read. Of course, Prophet Muhammad was illiterate.
Mm-hmm.
And then he says, read in the name of the Lord who created the heavens and the earth. And that's the time when Prophet has got very scared and didn't know what was happening. He was meditating in a cave because he was not feeling connected to the people around him.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the first verses of the Quran by which reading was the first order for the Prophet. And that's from there on, it was a conversation between God, from God to Gabriel, and Gabriel to Prophet Muhammad. And Prophet has given it to his followers and those who were around him. So that the Quran was preserved in the hearts of the Prophet and those around him, and then to the people. In the next, not even next generations, the same place that they were in, and then the next generation. Yeah.
So that you're saying that's the very first passage where it's surrendering into the wishes of reading, even though he can't read. It's like just surrender somehow. I'm trying to interpret what that means. So, sorry. So in the first passage where you're saying Gabriel gives a message to read, he's thinking, oh, I don't know how to read, but I will surrender and know that it will be somehow provided. Is that what you mean?
Well, he was scared. He didn't know what was happening. It was the first time that he had that encounter in his life, right?
Yes.
So he just said, I can't read. And then the Gabriel started to recite the Quran to him. So Quran means that which is recited. So read means read, which is that which is going to be recited to you. And
Okay.
that's what was made. Like, there is a message for you here. You're going to be reading that to people. Right?
Okay, got it. Okay. So and how is it related to surrender?
So the whole Quran talks about that God is the only God. There's one God, which is the God of Jesus, Moses, Abraham, and Muhammad, and everybody else as human beings. And of course, DNA proves that we're all connected. There is oneness. And so oneness of humanity talks about also oneness of God. There's only one God. That's what Islam is based on. And so in that space, the Quran is a conversation between the Prophet Muhammad and God, talking about the birth of, just like in the Bible, talking about the almost same stories. You see the connections, talking about the birth of the universe, talking about how we could be living our life in a state of surrender, how we could be living in a state of connection, how we can, create a lifestyle that works and is in compliance with God, and how God would like human beings to live.
So, hold on. I'm just writing notes. So, a couple different things. There's, hold on. I have so many ideas. All right, so let's start back. I'm going to unbundle the things that you mentioned because there are so many questions that came out of it. Because, as I mentioned before, I read this book called Heretic. And the thing I really didn't like about that book is I felt more closed. It made me fearful and closed. And it was actually completely contrary to my experience when I've actually met. I don't know a lot of, I haven't had a lot of exposure to Muslims. However, I've met people, I've done traveling, and we had tour guides, we met people, and I just had such a lovely time in Turkey and Egypt. And, so there was a missing, there was a lack of resonance with what I was reading versus what I was experiencing. And so one of the things that this gal writes in the book Heretic is that there's only one God, my God over your God. My God is better than your God, and only my God can exist. That's why you have people, running around for religious reasons, killing each other, because there's only one God. And then what you said in the beginning is that there's only one supreme entity, but they come in many different forms. So is that something in the Quran, or is that your belief? Where is that from?
Well, we don't see it as in many forms. We see different manifestations of God through signs. The signs would be the creation of the universe, the beauty that you see around you, the creativity of mankind. All of these are the reflections of the greatness of God.
Okay.
Right? So we see it's one God, of course, but it's the God of every single human being,
Okay, got it.
right?
So if
But it
Jesus came in a
doesn't mean
form, yeah, okay, sorry, go ahead.
it doesn't mean we're going to be like, fighting over that. It's up to you. It's your spiritual journey. If you reach to a state where you kind of acknowledge the oneness of God, acknowledge the oneness of humanity, you're in a state of resonance, because that's a fundamental truth to the universe.
Mm-hmm.
um, if you do spiritual inquiry and you keep asking the questions, you'll actually get to a space where you cannot deny oneness of God, because everything is so coherent, everything is so interconnected, everything is so complex. And if you know about fine tuning of the universe, you know that there's no way this can be multiple gods. There's no way this could be different ways. It cannot be the different ways we kind of draw a face to God, because that's one of the issues that human beings have, is that they want to see God now. They want
Mm-hmm.
to see they want to see God in this life, when in
Right.
reality that defeats the whole purpose of life.
Mm-hmm.
Purpose of life is to go through a spiritual journey by which you believe, and when you believe and get out on the other side, that's when you get to meet God. And that's what Muslims believe, because when you believe right now and stay firm in your belief, because you've seen the signs, you've acknowledged the prophet, and or the prophets, all of them. That's a space where you kind of live in a state of believing, because nobody's going to come out from the sky and give you a book or show you God, and that's not how it works, right?
Mm-hmm. So
It's
you're
through
just saying like there's
experience.
right. So I think what you're saying, which I resonate with, is there's just we're all one. There is only one divine presence.
Yeah.
It can be represented and manifested in many different forms in Jesus, in Buddha, in whatever the different forms that manifestation of God may take. But there is only one supreme entity. Is is that what you meant? Is I just want to make sure I understood what you said.
I find it hard to kind of present God in ways that are limited.
Right.
So I wouldn't even put a face to God, because in Islam, God is something that which you can never imagine, and that's the reward
Mm.
of somebody who would have believed. That's a state where because you're believing in blindness, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you move in to the other side, which is where you move into your eternal life, that's when you can see, because you believed in blindness, right? I
Mm.
mean, if you start to put those limited kind of structures and say, okay, God could be this and could be that, now I can see God, I can touch and feel God, you've kind of limited God in
Mm.
that space. And
Mm-hmm.
God is a lot more than that,
Mm.
much, much more.
So then, so okay, and I apologize, but I'm partially trying to
I
unwind
understand.
my ignorance at this point because I've read one book and I feel like okay, that
I'm
cannot be
so
the only
sorry
story.
that was your experience, because
Yeah.
I didn't that's one of those books that I couldn't get myself to buy. I couldn't get myself to read. I was like heartbroken when I saw that. Of course, she was writing from a place of resentment. She did get into political issues that actually triggered her experience,
Mm.
whatever that might be, was very, very negative,
Right.
and the people around her has given her a hard time.
Mm-hmm.
And so she kind of took that with her, decided to come out of the religion, decided to become an atheist, and then started to write about Islam. That's
Right.
her journey. That's up to her. But
Right.
it does not mean we should take that in. I mean, the more you allow variety in your thinking, and the more you read other books and what other people say, then you start to balance things out for yourself.
Well, I was
Yeah.
so, I have to say that one of the things I read that book and I was actually dismayed because I went into a complete state of utter fear. And it's like, oh my God, I'm
Oh,
terrified. And I
are
thought,
you scared of me?
honestly, I was like, I'm scared of letting Muslims in this country. Literally, you read that book, and that's what you conclude at the end. It's like it's
Yeah.
hopeless. We're never going there. Muslims aren't going to come in this country, and I'm just being brutally honest, not to offend
Of
anyone,
course. No, no, no.
but I read the book thinking there are irreconcilable differences. People, Muslims are going to come over, and they're never going to want to assimilate, and basically it will when they believe in one God, and this is what she writes in the book. They believe in one God, which means that your God is not superior, or they the instance of your God, your different beliefs in God are unacceptable. And so, the idea is to eradicate those
It's not up
beliefs.
to us to change that. It's not up to us. Everybody's on their own journey.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, we wouldn't force anybody. That is not in the Quran. And God said that to Prophet Muhammad many, many, many times. Even though your wish is to have everybody to be compliant or to come into this faith, this is never going to be the case. There's always going to be diversity. There's always going to be people with different faiths. That's literally stated in the Quran.
So how is it that people are
But it's always
interpreting
an
it?
invitation. So it's a message from God to humanity, everyone, not a specific race, not just Arabs, but every human being. It's a message from God to everyone, and it's an invitation more than forcing. Whatever people are doing out there, this is their mistake. I mean, that cannot be called Islam, right?
Ah, okay. You're saying that's what they've interpreted, um, pa- their own personal interpretation of the Quran is there's only one supreme God and all other gods should be, wiped off the face of the earth is what some people interpret. But you're saying, hey, that's not really what the Quran says, and it's not even for Muslims. This is a general directive to everyone, not just
It's the
Muslims.
reality of the human condition. There will be different ways by which people kind of perceive God and worship God, right?
Hmm.
But Islam comes to say, hey, maybe you believe God is this, but God is actually this. It's an
Hmm.
invitation and it's a message to the truth, to the
Hmm.
light.
Hmm.
That's how we see it.
Hmm.
That's the only way we see it. It's just an invitation.
Mm, yeah, so that's interesting. So it's very, I think that the key thing that you just said that is completely contrary to what is written in that book that is actually a New York Times bestseller. So a lot of people in the
I
US
know.
have read
I'm
this
so
book.
sorry to hear
I know,
that.
it is, I would be really upset actually too if there was a book about Chinese people and one person somehow had captured the voice erroneously of what one Chinese person experienced and said now people walk around and assuming that that's the Chinese
Right.
experience. That would just be so awful. And so
Yeah.
this is what this woman has done for me. And so, and I,
Unfortunately,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So the whole idea is that there is diversity, and there's nothing that one can. That's just the nature of reality. There is going
Yeah.
to be diversity, and it's not up to you to change the diversity, which is
No,
very different.
no.
Okay. The other thing that you said is that when you were describing, you said there are different manifestations of God. Oh, let's see, and how God wants to have someone live. And so in the Quran, there's the Sharia law, as I
Mm,
understand it. Again, excuse my ignorance. I have
yeah.
this limited understanding from this book. And so this gal talks about the Sharia law and how people interpret it literally, and how there needs to be a discussion on what the correct interpretation. And to be fair, I think the thing that she is saying is that there needs to be a reform with respect to Islam, um, and and maybe it's not a reform so much as what I'm hearing you say is a proper understanding of what some of those key passages of the Quran really mean. So that's where I think you're connected. Um,
Right.
but she talks about how Sharia law is kind of the law, and how Sharia law is actually incorporated into it's not just a personal belief, it's actually reinforced by a systematic governmental process. And so
Which
that's,
scares the hell out of a lot of people.
yeah, so what is that? And I'm like, what? Is that true? I don't know what to think. So,
Okay, let me give you a little bit of context here, okay?
okay.
Now, we don't talk about Sharia law in our daily life.
Hmm.
Just to start off, that is something that happens in the court. Yes, it is something that is taken by the court because we apply the law of the Quran. All
Hmm.
right. Now, if you have the choice between man-made law and divine law, which one would you choose? Now, divine law has always has some kind of wisdom, but that's not always visible to people. That's not always perceived very well.
Hmm.
I'll give you one example, which is, if you steal, your hand is chopped. right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people get scared. Why? And I would rather be in jail for whatever number of years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, the severity of that law ensures its effectiveness, right? And so there was a time in Islam that about 100 years where no one was able to steal. No one. So you live in a space of safety, and that comes as the divine law. It's something where, because it's so severe and it's so scary to people, that they would not, whoever thinks of committing that kind of crime would never do it. So it's very rare, very scarce.
Mm-hmm.
But if you go to a space where, you know what, it's okay, I'm going to go to jail for a few months, I still can steal other people's money. I can do the things that I want to do, right? So there is that effectiveness of that law, and then there is that the man-made law that wants to precede divine law. So that's where we're at right now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I understand. I think what you're saying, but here's a challenge. I guess here's what I'm trying to understand in practice. So you actually have a judge. You're saying that if, let's say a judge were to try to intercept and say this is the man-made law, um, you're saying it may be they may not do it right. You know, like why are they actually? Why would a judge come? So in the United States, a judge, we have the law. It's the Constitution. So the and basically it's up to each judge to interpret the Constitution, right? And determine what the right thing to do is versus what I'm hearing you say is like, you know, the law is the law. You chop someone's hand off if they steal. And it's not up to the judge to decide if that's like, well, you know, here's the
Of
proper
course, you have to
situation.
get witnesses.
Right.
At least, you know, 4 witnesses. If that happens, if you cannot get witnesses, your law doesn't pass, right?
Yes. Yeah, you have to
Yeah.
have witnesses, but then once a witness, and there's a context, right? So let's say that this person stole, but they've actually had a long history of never stealing, and they've had a rough childhood, which like preceded that, which weighed an explanation and understanding of why they stole this thing. The sentence may be less harsh than someone who has stolen things on a recurrent basis. So if someone has stolen something from a recurrent basis, it's like this person needs to be put in jail for a much longer time. So there's a subjective piece involved in interpreting. It should be objective, right? But then there's all these extenuating circumstances where that the two people could be stealing something and one person would have a harsher sentence than the other. But what I'm hearing is that, and I'm not sure, like if I went and I stole something, would my hand get chopped off regardless? The judge is like, that's the law, your hand is
I mean, I
getting
don't
chopped
see
off.
it happen here, but that's the way it was practiced at the time of the Prophet and throughout the Islamic era.
Ah,
So
okay.
I don't see it happening now. I don't know if it happens because, as I said, I mean, we don't talk about Sharia law in our life because through the connection with the Quran, we're always in a state of how do I say it? We're always in a state of applying what is being said. So we're purifying ourselves all the time and making sure we don't steal, making sure we give out, you know, to the poor, making sure we try to be the best that we can be, right? So
Yes.
it's rare that you see all of these elements, and I do not claim any expertise in Sharia law or anything because it's something that I don't encounter on a daily basis, as I
Yeah.
said
Well,
before.
you're in a metropolitan area where you said it's a
Mhm.
multicultural, and I think that, and here's what I don't understand either, because you know I'm only reading like one chapter of a book, and the author says that there are many instances of people still getting stoned, of still people applying Sharia law, and I don't really know if those are more tribal environments. Um, I'm not sure. I can't remember from
I don't
recalling
know.
the
I
book.
can't tell you because I don't know if it happens in my country. I never hear of it,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I
so
don't know.
it's I think that the difficulty is that, you know, you have one person who's proposing that this is what's happening everywhere where it's not. Just like you may look at Trump and saying he's a representative of us and everyone is in the United States is like him. That you know what I
No, we
mean? Like
know
that's
that.
not that's not necessarily that's not a kind of a um, fair look at it. Um,
Right, and that's one of the errors of the human mind is that we tend to generalize, we tend to make everything the same, so
hmm
that we just pass the space where we actually have to think for ourselves, or we seek variety, or we seek the truth. And that's one of the mistakes we always fall into, because like all Muslims are this, all Muslims are that, and
Right,
it's so wrong,
right.
because we've coexisted with Christians and the Jews for thousands of years. Now it's the time that we're always like we're on the map now. Everybody knows that we're like we're silenced, or being like pointed the finger at, which is wrong.
Mm. Well, how does it feel? Because uh, when you see a Muslim crack in the name of the Quran committing, an act of in their minds God by
Hmm.
killing or blowing up or 9/11, like how, as a Muslim, how does that resonate with you? Or you're like, oh no, like like with Trump, I'm like, oh no, please just stop. I mean,
It's the same. It's the same. I mean, we don't acknowledge what they do. We don't acknowledge the killing of innocent lives. There's no way. I mean, God says in the Quran, if you kill one life, it's as if you've killed all humanity. It's as
okay,
simple as that. Yeah.
and there's this, and again,
There has to be a context for all of these wars. If there is war to happen, there has to be a context. There has to be good reasons, legitimate reasons, and all of these elements. And you don't do that through, odd, psychologically, what do I say? Psychologically troubled human beings.
right.
You do that through countries where they agree on things or whatever it might be. So that to us is what is troubling Islam, what has given it the bad name,
hmm
which is unfortunately sad.
Yeah, and I think that part of it, again, and not to mention, I think I'm unwinding all the awful thoughts in the book so far. This is actually super helpful.
Please do, yeah,
Yeah,
please do.
the other thing that she mentions is that, well, people kill in the name of Quran because there's like perks, right? Once you die, you're considered, you reach a certain status, and you'll have like all these women in your life in the future. Like, you go to like a certain place in heaven that is more esteemed than
Mm.
even the rest of the people because you've committed this act to show your, um, respect for God. So, so there are bonus points if you kill for in the name of the of God. So, it, what would the Quran actually say?
Right. Now, God has created you and me, right?
hmm
Would God be happy if you die and a Muslim kills you? I don't think so, right?
Yeah,
And would God give me a status over you because I've killed you and I've nailed, those who do not believe? I don't think so.
yeah,
It's mostly war, as I said before, happens through a context and through a leader, and there has to be a way by which it happens.
hmm
It's not like these odd, groups that call themselves whatever they might be, and they use the Quran in the name of God to be able to reach that status.
mm,
Now, whatever she's described in the book is actually in the Quran, where God says those who have given their lives for the sake of God do actually gain a higher status. They do gain a higher status in heaven, and that's what we know that to be. And there are many ways you can gain that status. Part of it is being in war for a good cause, and part
hmm
of it is being, you could be in the sea and you die in the sea because of the storm.
hmm
So just there are many ways you can get there.
right. So that in some ways, so it sounds like it's like the United States, where people have these radical interpretations of the Bible, and they go
Mm.
and they interpret it based on their own subjective understanding of it, maybe misunderstandings of it, and then and then and then give that religion a bad name. Honestly, because that happens a lot here in the U.S. too, um, where people under the name of Christian religion do things that are just downright unchristian. Um,
Yeah.
so it sounds like I mean, that was, I was like, this just can't be. This, whatever I'm reading just doesn't seem right to me. Um, and I'm glad that we talked because I think it helps. I mean, part of it is just having people understand, um, and people don't have time to read the Bible or the Quran, so they'll just walk away with their incorrect assumptions.
But
Um,
I do encourage them to get back to the Bible and the Quran, because these are the words that came through the prophets,
right,
and that's what God has wanted us to hear.
right,
So why dismiss that and go to, a book like Heretic or whatever that might be? Does that
right.
make sense?
Yeah, well,
So
if
read
it,
it from the source. So that's my invitation, is go to the source, read it from the source, understand it from the
well,
source.
my friend did. He read the book Heretic, and he was so disturbed by it, he started reading the Quran, and he said, "It does say this. Like, it does say this in the Quran." And so, I
But in
don't.
a context, that's what you need to kind of interpret as well,
Right, and you're
right?
saying the
Yeah,
context of when it talks
yeah. There
about.
is historical data. There is because the Quran has not come all at once to the Prophet. It has
Mm,
come throughout his life as he moved from Mecca to Medina, as he established the state in Medina, and then there were a few wars with the different people in Mecca and around, because they wanted to suppress Islam, and there has to be. Now, one of the ways Islam has done war is that we just don't go into war and kill people. And the Prophet has never killed any person except for one person. That was the only person he killed throughout all of the wars that they went through. There are morals, and there are ways where you never cut trees, you never kill a child or a woman or an elder. So
mm,
those are ways by which Islam kind of talks. You only kill those who fight you.
mm,
That's the context. You kill those who fight you, nothing else.
right, who literally are physically harming you versus.
Physically harming you and fighting.
Right,
Yes. And
right.
I think the perception of those terrorists is that those people are harming us. Those people are whatever they're doing to our faith, or whatever might be their reasons. And I think their mindset is that they're harming us. We're gonna be after them.
Mm,
But of course, that's wrong.
mm. Yeah, it's. I'm so glad that we talked. Thank you.
I'm glad too.
Oh. It means so much to me that you're listening to the show. Would love your support in any way by giving me comments below, or to subscribe to the show, or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.